So one of the first questions I'm going to take from Slido, it's sort of more of a broad question. I believe this can be a question for Nikki. Are there any thoughts about an STMD major equipment AO, somewhat equivalent to SMD's regular planetary major equipment AOs?
So I may have to admit ignorance here. Are we talking, I'm not sure what the major equipment AOs are. Is anybody else on the panel?
Any insights?
And we do participate, obviously, in the mission of opportunities and the AO calls for new discovery and frontiers. So I don't know if we're talking about that, but we do actually have arrangements with them to have incentives for certain technologies for those missions. We do MOUs for those.
Okay.
If anybody wants to clarify or meet them, I can find out since someone's got their hand raised. Oh. Okay. Actually, that's good information. I was not aware of that, but we can. Okay. Okay. So we can find out more, but thanks for sharing. Yeah, we'll look into it.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification and thank you for answering the question. So the next one is also from Slido. It's an upvoted question for Jenn. What are the pathways for transitioning technologies from early stage innovations to SBIR/STTR, I think is what they meant.
Yeah, so the big thing with SBIR and STTR is that the only eligible awardees are small businesses. So you have to be a small business to propose. We don't say anything about, if you were just incorporated as a small business and happen to be a startup, right? It's just less than 500 employees, but it has to be a small business. So you'll see in the early stage opportunities, we have opportunities for many different types of eligibilities, universities, individuals, even large businesses also sometimes win things like NIACs. So the key to transitioning to SBIR or STTR is finding a small business partner, or if you're a university, creating a spinoff. We see that happen too. We see faculty partner with postdocs or students and create a company, right? So that actually would be, if you're interested in exploring that as an avenue, I'd encourage you to talk to Maggie Yancey. Put your hand up again at some point today, because we have a program called the ICOR program that we support that also helps provide some funding to help people explore whether or not their technology is a viable idea to spin off into something like a company. We'll make a $10K to $50K investment to actually fund you to participate in the NSF ICOR program, either for a short regional course or for a national course. And so we encourage folks that are interested to check out that ICOR program as well. We just recently expanded it to academics being eligible for ICOR, our ICOR program. It used to only be available for small businesses. Now it's available for academics as of last year.
And I just want to add one thing and follow up on ask Jenn a question about that as well, because I received several questions from folks here, and pretty much at every meeting we go to, I received some question in this format. First, I just want to reiterate what she said earlier about how worth it the startup cost for getting into the SBIR program is. I get a lot of questions from folks and small businesses that have not yet written an SBIR proposal, and there definitely is a startup cost or a format you have to get used to and those sorts of things. One thing that we try to do through LSIC, and I was going to ask Jenn and put her on the spot a little, she has some excellent avenues too for kind of teaching or showing or tutoring folks on how to get started on those proposals. But we also try to do things through the LSIC and our focus groups where we partner kind of other small businesses that have been around for a bit and been doing this with folks that are newer to give them some kind of advice from peers and colleagues that are living that as well. But I'll just reiterate that it's really, really worth it. And once you have done that, it really opens a lot of doors, not just across our programs, but even with other government agencies. We have SBIRs that have been at AFRL and other Army, other government agencies, DARPA, that we have worked with as well. So encourage that. And Jenn, do you have any kind of workshops or things that you want to talk about?
Damien may talk a little bit about it later too, who's the SBIR Deputy Program Executive in the room. We do a lot of workshops. We have a lot of resources for folks that are interested in getting into SBIR, and we actually have a very healthy percentage annually of people that are first-time awardees. That's important to us. Walt mentioned earlier that there's a lot of people that, might get many SBIRs over the years, which is also okay, because it can take, great examples, IROSA, the rollout solar array that is currently adding power to the International Space Station. That technology with deployable space systems got something like 25 SBIR awards to work on component and smaller level technology challenges they had before they got to an integrated solution that was ready for a ground demo that was run by GCD and TDM before the in-space testing was funded by AFRL and the ISS. And so it can take, for some of these technologies, many awards when they're at that 125K, 150K level to actually Frankenstein the thing together, develop the thing that, the ultimate capability that you need. But my point was that we have a high percentage annually of new, first time, never before awarded participants in the SBIR program. And we try to make sure that we're watching that balance so that new folks have a chance to get into the SBIR program as well. Last thing I will say here is that, Chris mentioned Capstone and he said it was a phase 3. That's an SBIR phase 3 award. And I think Advanced Space had less than a handful of phase 1 awards prior to that. Like they hadn't been working in the SBIR program for 10 years, 15 years before they got this $20 million opportunity. It was on the order of, it was single digit years, low single digit years.
Maiden Space, too.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah, and what some of the things Maiden Space, Nikki worked with Maiden Space on as well.
The one last thing, because there were so many questions about that from people at the breaks and things, if Damien could stand up one more time, because he is the guy who has all the answers. I just want to point that out. So everybody see Damien. I just want to put face to name back there. Thanks so much.
Thank you. The next question is for LK. You may have mentioned this during your presentation, but someone does have a question about, does NASA anticipate another round of open ACO/tipping point calls in the next year? So I guess it's a timeline question.
Okay. We are planning to release, as I said, an open ACO later this year. That's really what, again, is, as I said, is plan. Okay. Of course, plan alone doesn't help. We also need funding to go with that, especially Congress needs to help us to get these things off the ground, because I think right now, not knowing exactly how the next fiscal year budget is going to be, because there's a lot of talk about getting back to 2022 level and all kinds of sequestration type issues. So anyway, if you have a real budget, and definitely we are planning to start the next ACO, which will be open, and you can continue to submit proposals, and then every now and then we will review and get them selected. For the tipping point, Walt mentioned that it's going to be maybe perhaps every other year, because we were doing it every year until recently, but because of the funding constraints, because the Congress took a lot of money away from our budget last year, and that kind of constrains us, and now we'll be able to do maybe once every other year, but we're hopeful that we can get back to this once a year cycle.
So just to add to that, since Walt, I'm covering for him, and I'd be remiss that LK said it perfectly, the ACOs would be open annually, like you said. So we're really encouraging working with NASA centers, industry and NASA centers working together. And again, that's something we can do through the LSIC focus groups, make introductions. Our PTs and SELs, NASA leads that are part of those focus groups can help with that. Because a lot of it's just connecting and knowing who to talk to. And I know we have a lot of different centers. And then the tipping points, I think, in addition to the funding constraints, part of going to the every other year cycle is, quite frankly, the scope of the tipping points and the magnitude of the milestones or the objectives trying to be reached has grown quite a bit as well, and resulting in a lot of demos. For example, you take the cryo demos, there were 4 selected last time. So I think the ACO announcements just came out yesterday, right, LK? The most recent ones, and the tipping points will be in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, we made an announcement, as I said, yesterday on the ACO awards. Tipping point, you should be hearing from us very soon. Okay, hopefully the next 2-3 weeks or so. Anyway, maybe before end of May. That's our target.
Great, thanks. I am finding a question for Chris here. How will data from the flights of small spacecraft technology be made available to the public?
So a number of the missions we do in small spacecraft technology program are with commercial partners. So some of that data is obviously going to be proprietary to them, but the parts of it that are public, the final reports actually end up on Techport. So that's the answer.
And then moving on to our Techport representatives, is there information on what constitutes a large or small business in the tool?
I don't think we have that level of detail in the Techport tool itself, but if you visit the SBIR STTR website, they have more detailed information about the requirements for those awards and definitions for what constitutes a small business. So you can find a link to their website on the Techport Funding Opportunities tool, as well as links to all the other opportunities.
I think, let me try to answer that. The way, I know the SBIR has defined small businesses like 500 employees, right? 500 employees is the threshold for being a small business. And we did the same thing for tipping point also. We said in order for you to bring in a lower cost contribution level, we said you got to be no more than 500 employees. And that's how I would probably say 500 employees is the threshold we're using for small businesses.
Yeah, we tried to be pretty standard within STMD following the SBIR kind of definitions, but I couldn't encourage you enough to check eligibility in each solicitation before you go through the work of putting together the proposal and applying, because there are details in the eligibility section of each solicitation that are nuanced and important. So. Yeah, Damien can answer all those questions for SBIR, and Harry can for STRG, but check the eligibility sections in the solicitations.
Okay, great, thank you. This is more of a general funding panel question. So how does NASA plan to keep up with the rapidly evolving landscape of rideshare vehicles for finding flight opportunities for new technology demonstrations?
All right, I'll try to take that one. Okay, so the Small Spacecraft and Flight Opportunities portfolio, a few months back, we released a draft RFP for vehicles for commercial services that could test payloads in both suborbital and orbital environments, specifically hosted payloads. Again, not looking for deployment of payloads on orbit. If you're thinking about vehicles that can deploy payloads on orbit, talk with the Launch Services Program. But for payloads that are hosted on suborbital vehicles, commercial suborbital vehicles, or they're hosted on commercial platforms in orbit, we put out a draft RFP asking for industry comments on that. We were supposed to have the full RFP out at this point. It's not out yet. We're still working through those comments. Hopefully we'll get that out soon. That will be how, at least within the Flight Opportunities and Small Spacecraft Technology portfolio, we will have access to a number of vehicles that are commercially available U.S. vehicles for testing of technologies in suborbital space and the orbital environment. And those vehicles, that contract is available to any STMD program, or frankly, any U.S. government entity that has a requirement that fits that scope of testing a technology in suborbital or orbital space. That contract will have an on-ramp clause where new providers or new capabilities can be on-ramped on a regularly occurring basis. And the suborbital version of it, we're now in the 4th iteration from way back when LK started it. That has been kind of the workhorse of the Flight Opportunities Program, and hopefully will also be very helpful to small spacecraft technology and other capabilities going forward. Again, we make those vehicles available through partnerships with SBIR, partnerships with TechMat, stuff like GCD and internal activities, as well as other government agencies that have desire. do that. And then in general, we try to structure a lot of our commercial contracts or grants where we provide, and this is beyond just the flight opportunities and small spacecraft technology portfolio, but a lot of those are structured such that the academic entity or the commercial entity can go off and get their own ride to space or service that they need on the commercial market. So that's how the tech flights is structured. That's how things that are coming through, say, tipping point, they need to get to space. They're coming forward with, and we're going to buy a launch on this. So generally speaking, those are the two paths for how we're trying to provide access to all those vehicles and also remain agile as things change. Either let you, the technology developer, if that's who you are, purchase your own flight, or we have on-ramp clauses in IDIQ contracts that provide access to those vehicles, and will be constantly refreshed to do so.
And I just want to step back and note kind of the context of the question. So one thing about space tech is, compared to something like the Science Mission Directorate or Exploration Systems, which are stakeholders as well, they're quite large mission directorates, right? The one benefit I think of us being a smaller kind of service mission directorate is that we do have a little bit more agile processes. We lean a little bit more forward. So like the question you were asked, the way it was phrased, I guess, on how are we handling that? I would actually say we lean very into it, and we're kind of sometimes the pathfinder / guinea pig, depending on the day, for how to do these things. But like Chris is saying, there's lots of ways through his, but we had CLIPS here yesterday. We have MOUs in place with CLIPS where we have some allocation on the CLIPS flights for technologies. We do a lot of interesting partnering with our other mission directorates, as well as, like he said, through tipping points or even SBIRs on how we can find different and novel ways to work and fly together.
Great, thank you, Nikki. In an effort to stay on time, we're going to go ahead and close out the panel and thank all of our panelists for giving their presentations and sitting on the panel. We're going to take about a 10-minute break now, and we will do our best to gather up these additional Slido questions and get them answered for folks. So thank you.